Let the past die, Lloyd. Kill it if you have to.
All right.
Just a suggestion.
This feels like the opening to a Lorekeepers game. I'm like, ooh, he's doing his Lorekeeper voice.
Just a suggestion. Just a suggestion, Lloyd. Just let it die and kill it if you have to. Sage advice from our good friend Kylo Ren.
Yes.
I heard he's having a hard time with the. Yeah, he's a friend of the show. He's having a hard time lately, sort of leading the First Order to bring order back to the galaxy. And I thought I'd just give him a little bit of a shout out there. Bless him. So I watched this film that I was telling you about yesterday, Lloyd, Silence. And I think you will like it for the cool historical things, but it's a slow-ass film, man.
Right.
Like, it's Scorsese anyway, and he likes to take his time.
He does.
And I enjoyed it. But yeah, it's a weird one. But what I loved about it was how polite Japanese inquisitors were to European priests in the 17th century. Because they'd be like, we understand what you're doing. You're trying to bring your faith here, and we get that. But we don't want you to do that. We'll be fine with you, but we are going to torture and kill all of our citizens who have decided to show faith in your religion, and it's nuts. So I would recommend it for that alone.
For sure.
And
yeah,
it's on my list. Yeah, man. How's your day been?
It's been long, Rob. Very long. There was a hurricane here the other day. I mean, we barely noticed, in fairness. It wasn't that bad up in Dublin. It was a bit rainy and stormy and stuff, but but the south of the country got fucked. Which is traditional for this country, is that the south gets fucked and Dublin is fine. Which is why people tend to not like Dubliners, because we have it very good. But because of that, the trams weren't working in this city, and I am a person who takes the tram every time I go anywhere. And thus, tonight when I left my workshop, I had to take a Herculean journey home. It took me 2 hours to get home from the city, and I was extremely displeased about that fact. But other than that, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, man. Like I messaged you. I says like, that boar ain't got a shit on public transport, man. Like, it sounded like a pain in the ass.
The bus is gross. It smells. Everyone's like so close. I'm like used to the tram. Fucking Jesus.
Yeah, I just like, please, like, I had this like a few times, and you might have had the same thing. You're sat there, you're on a bus, and like someone will come on and they'll walk up like the aisle or whatever, and there's like about 1,000 free seats that they pass by, and they decide to go on one like right next to you, and it's like, what are you lonely? What's the problem?
God, out of my face.
Please, I'm just Anyway, so that was a weird collection of things. Kylo Ren. Scorsese film and public transport. We're in now, Lloyd. So hello, ladies and gentlemen, orcs and goblins. Thank you very much for joining us live on Performance Check. I'm joined, as you can see, by Jarl, and we've got some ultra suggestions, topics on the ultra stream. This is the ultra stream. Lloyd and I are going to cross streams, and we're going to talk some. we're going to talk some role-playing games, tips, queries, and annoyances, and other stuff. So, Lloyd, you mentioned you wanted to talk about expectations of players in different settings, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you mean by this.
Yes. So I preface this, as I do everything that I say, is that I don't have any grudges, but we played a game the other night. I ran a game for Ladies' Night, Shield Maiden, set in Iscloft. And I recently made a warlock sort of based class for Iscloft. I thought it was the least magical of the magical options, and thus might fit better. And I crushed the spell list down into things that I think fit Iscloft. But even with the crushing of the spell list, the Volva, which is like the name of the seer class, still had magic, the likes of which would cause her to be destroyed instantly in this setting. And it didn't really occur to me until we started to play. There was a scene where the ladies, the crew of the Friskmare, which is like this all-woman crew, had destroyed and razed a village in Gunland under the command of their leader. They didn't know why, but they killed everything, all the people, all the animals, everything, and they burnt the crops. And so the Jarl, with some of his burliest men, came by and was like, okay, you fucked up here. This is unacceptable. But I'm not a stupid man, so you can pay me a weregild, which is like a thing they used to do in Viking times, where if you killed someone, you could pay for their life, you know? And so he was like, it'll be 12,000 hack silver, which is astronomical amount, but they destroyed a village. And they were like, how about you get fucked? And he was like, look, I'm trying to be reasonable here, but like, you've come into my lands and killed lots of people. And there was this guy with him, his champion, who was this like 7 foot tall Viking warrior with like a great sword in his back, and a great sword is very, very rare in Iskloft. And so they're giving him all this fucking lip, and he's like, look, like, and he's being reasonable, right? Like he's
been very reasonable. Sounds polite to me.
Brought his men and killed them, but he didn't do that. And so he's like, right, hack on, do it. And he's like, the big guy gets off his horse, and he's like, okay, I'm going to challenge one of you to home gang to avenge the fallen, which is like a traditional duel that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so none of them accept it initially until the wizard or the vulva comes over, and then she's like, I'll fight you. And traditionally a home gang is like each person has a sword and they fight, and so the thing that happens is the fight starts, he bashes the shit out of her with his sword, and then she summons lightning from the sky onto him, right? Which is like absolutely fine, because like she's mechanically allowed to do that, right? And like I'm not giving out to Katie for that, because it's totally the best call to make in that situation. But that is like such a disconnect from what would happen in that, in my mind anyway, in what would happen in Iskloft. And like those men who were with that man would have been totally in their rights to kill the witch, because witches are like illegal and like awful and everyone hates them. But I didn't do that because I know that lots of those players who are playing are new to the setting, and you know, expectations aren't as clear. But you know, it struck me as like really unlikely and unusual. Now the guy went on to defeat Katie's character anyway, but that was like one of the things. The other thing that happened was the character had access to Wall of Fire, which is a very, very dramatic spell, right? Like it's enormously powerful and very obviously powerful. And so again, this is like my fault for keeping it in the spell list. And so that came up twice. They had like crash landed their ship in an ice flow, and then they ended up in this tundra in the middle of nowhere with nothing, and it was cold. And she was like, "I'll summon a wall of fire in order to like keep us warm." Great idea, but also just like such overkill, you know, and like so dramatic and like so huge in a setting where witches ostensibly are hated. And it happened a few more times. There was the one that really struck me, and is that her character was critically hit by a sword in the face, and so like it had cut off a chunk of her jaw and a chunk of her tongue, right? So she was like choking to death on her own blood, and so she had to like make a save to like basically try and stuff her mouth so she wouldn't like choke to death. And so she was like, okay, I cast healing on myself, which is obviously the thing you would do, but my mistake was to allow healing magic in the game at all, because it like trivializes, if I have this brutal wound system, then I cannot also have arcane healing, because it just doesn't make any sense. And so I know that, for example, if like let's see, someone who's played in Iskloft a lot, like Chex, for example, right? He would have played tons of Iskloft games. Even if he was a spellcaster, wouldn't have used those spells, right, in those situations, because he would know the setting very well. And so I think it falls to me as the person who makes the setting to like clarify what is appropriate. And we talked about this actually during the game, you and myself. You were talking about like you need a book of like customs and how to behave yourself in a setting that's like so rigid. And so that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. But it's very rambly. Apologies. I'm like full of energies so far. But you know what I mean? Like there's a certain way that you act.
Yeah.
Like in that situation with the home gang, for example, that's a very formal and like religious ceremony. And so it doesn't make sense for characters in that situation to be like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? It would be like, okay, he's called for a home gang. That's a holy thing, like a ritualistic, sacred thing. And so everyone would go, yep, that's appropriate. And then everyone would like act and behave appropriately, right? Because it's supposedly the gods are watching and they're judging, you know?
Can I make a suggestion though? Because I'm a big fan of actions that players take in the games becoming canon in some shape or form. So could that actually be the first recorded case of a Volver getting involved in a home gang, and thus that is now why it is now frowned upon because it didn't
Absolutely.
happen before?
I
like
like that a lot. Yeah.
this happened this one time, and this lady summoned lightning from the sky, and it
Yeah.
went horribly wrong. So we're not
Yeah.
allowing it to happen anymore.
So I think what I might do in future is that this specify, and this is what would have happened actually, is that you would specify and be like, this is the home gang. You know, the person challenged gets to decide what the weapons are, but there has to be weapons. It's like a physical contest. It's not one of magic, you know? So it's like a simple thing that I could have done, but I just didn't really think of. I also just imagined there's no way that like the wizard would like go for that, because you're obviously going to get fucked by a fighter, you know? Like, it's obviously going to happen. He's going to wreck you like in a one-on-one situation. But I liked it, and I thought it was ballsy, and I thought it was like interesting. And like you say, it could definitely be the reason why now Volvas are not allowed to be in a home gang. It's like illegal now, you know?
Yeah,
but
definitely.
yeah, so just like I guess a question of like expectations and stuff, and like I need to like be clearer on what the setting's about, I think. Or like particularly in relation to because the rest of the characters all make sense, and it's easy to be a rogue or a fighter or a barbarian and stuff because they all fit. But it's harder when the role of a magic user is so specific. So I think I need to put a big old paragraph at the start of the magic class to be like, here is what your role in society is, and here's how people expect you to act and stuff like that, you know?
It is tricky because, like you say, magic itself is frowned upon in Iscloft anyway, and you only want certain types of magic in there anyway. So if you don't want magic users throwing lightning bolts and firewalls, then the players are then going to start asking the question, well, that's what a magic user does.
Yes.
So, well, some of them anyway. So I suppose that the thing that you could do is just rewrite the spell list to things that are more
Yes.
maybe even making your own spells. I don't know, man.
What I've done since that game, almost immediately afterwards, I was like, okay, that's a problem. But it's my fault that there's a problem there because I included these spells and they're mechanically great spells. And so I wouldn't use them. And so what I've done since is I've removed a bunch of the more sort of ostentatious or like, you know, like I've removed those spells and I've put in a lot more sort of like illusion and divination and enchantment spells. So spells that are very like mind related. Plus some spells like plant growth, which makes a lot of sense. And that was one that she used really well. I have to say it was a genius call. They were like in this tundra in the middle of nowhere. And she was like, I'm gonna use plant growth to like give us something, anything, which was a great idea. And it's a spell I don't see used often in D&D. So I thought maybe that's kind of cool.
Things like
it's a tricky one, you know?
I think things like divination, because like you've always said that fate plays like quite a large part in this class. So maybe the idea of like looking to the future and give them more of that, maybe. I don't know. They're really interesting though, man. We've had some comments that I will quickly read. So Matt Click from A Fistful of Dice is here, and he says, that sounds gnarly, Lloyd. I once had to walk back to my car in Seattle because the bus wasn't running anymore. I had zero cash for a taxi. This was like pre-Uber, 2-hour walk in the rain. I've been there, man.
Good.
Thomas says some real-life bleak storm over here. So I hear. So on to the actual game topics. Matt then continues to say, Lloyd, regarding healing in Iscloft, would you consider adding healing similar to the Scholar in Adventures in Middle-earth, where it's not magical per se, but still sort of mystical? Now, haven't you done something similar? I don't remember.
Yeah, so we do have, there's a class that I've adapted from Amethyst Quintessence, which is the War Leader, which is like a fucking incredible class from Amethyst and Quintessence. If you haven't seen that, it's great. It's like the old Warlord from 4th edition, where like your job is to stand there and go, you kill him, you do this, and you just buff all your friends, and it really makes you feel like a commander. So one of the paths I made for that is that of a surgeon, I guess. And you wouldn't call it a surgeon because it's not, like surgery as a concept doesn't exist in the Viking Age, but it's someone who knows, okay, you got to get that out of there and you got to then burn it shut. You know, it's like the basic sort of healing that they would have had in those days. Pour some boiling wine on that so it doesn't get infected, that kind of stuff. So that's, and it's not mystical. It's like spit and glue sort of situation, but it's something. I think the Scholar is really, really good. What I want to not have in Iscloft, and I've decided that basically since the last game, is I don't want healing that can happen during a fight. because for lots of reasons. It trivializes the brutal wounds, but also it just doesn't make sense to me that in 6 seconds you could potentially go over to somebody and be like, bam, slap them on the back, and then they're suddenly fine again when they've been stabbed. You know, it just doesn't work that way, and it's too much of a disconnect in my mind. So the Scholar is good. I think it has some sort of healing that you can do quickly, but there are things that I really like about it, like the herbalist stuff where you can like learn to use Athelas, for example, to like combat, you know, poisoned orc blades and things like that. That sort of shit is great. So I do really like the Scholar overall and the healer feature and stuff, but I would probably tweak it a little bit so you can't heal in combat.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I'm with you there. Like, it is a bit funny that in the same 6 seconds, you're right, you could actually end up being healthier than when you got hit with the weapon in the first place.
Yeah.
So it is interesting. Jeff Doty is here. Hey, man, how's it going? Jeff Doty says, magical healing is more and more becoming something I don't like having in games. If anything, I'd have magic healing gain HP, but not cure wounds outright. I agree. None in Iskloft is probably best, is what I think he means.
Yes. Jeff Doty is my spirit animal. He's on the same page on when it comes to this stuff, for sure. I agree wholeheartedly. I think the wound system is something that doesn't exist in lots of other settings, right? And so it needs specific rules. And when you have divine healing, which can potentially regrow limbs and close wounds, that we know, it kind of trivializes the idea that like a stab in the shoulder could kill you, but it could, you know? Like one of the wounds that Leah took in the game is this werewolf creature had like smashed into her leg and its claw got stuck in the bone of her leg, right? So in the bone of her leg. Now, if you pull that out, my brain is like, that's a bone marrow infection. You're fucking dead, right? You're just dead. You're just 100% dead, right? But it's also, you have to like, I struggle because I want all of that grittiness, but I also want it to be a game, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a tricky one. And maybe the healing that you could get would be the kind of stuff where you can like, you know, find some herbs that are like natural disinfectants and you can put them in there and maybe it doesn't get infected. Or you know that if you like manage to pour boiling wine or boiling alcohol and stuff like that, you'll be able to clean the wound and then close it up with like a sewing thread. That kind of shit is fine. But not like, and then like, it's fine. You know, no wax on, wax off sort of stuff.
What I love thinking about, and I know we always end up talking about Game of Thrones, but screw it, man. I'm going to talk about Game of Thrones. I like it in season 4 when the Hound gets gets bitten, and it fucks him. Like it ruins him for like days. And that's just because someone got lucky, you know. And it just adds much more tension to a fight because even if you get scratched, if you get bitten, if you just get a nasty little wound on the side of your neck, then that could be it for you.
Yeah, like think about a world where no one brushes their teeth, right? That's just not a thing that exists, right? No one brushes their teeth, no one does it. The concept doesn't exist. Imagine how filthy that mouth is, right? After weeks of not brushing your teeth and eating like nearly raw meat and drinking beer all the time, right? And then that person bites you and breaks the skin. You are getting infected, son. Just like there's 100% going to be an infection there. Like that's going to be nasty, you know?
It is going to be nasty. It is. Prue is here, and Prue says, "Hey, kittens, it's been a while, and I have come here to hear what the Hobbit paradigm is."
The Hobbit paradigm hype.
The Hobbit paradigm hype, man. It is going to be revealed to you ever so shortly. I assure you. Believe your ears, eyes, whatever. So Jeff Doty then says, it's tough going into a 5e game where certain classes have typical ways of being played out, but in a setting they may be radically different than that. It takes a lot more knowledge and advance. Yeah.
So that's definitely what I meant with like the vulva. You need to like, I need to include something at the start of that class to say, it's not a traditional magic user. Like you have magic, but your job is not to go in and be like that's not what you're going to be doing. Your job is to go roll some dice, as in like some bones, and then like look at them and go, this probably might happen in the future, you know? Or like look over a ritual and be like, this is the correct way to do it. Or like influence people with your like silver tongue, that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I really like that. And again, it just comes down to that thing we were talking about the other day when when you're preparing for the game and you give your players like a document or something, or like this is what Iscloft is and this is what you can have if you're this particular thing, and you then are able to create the character with that in mind, so then when you come to the table or the virtual table or whatever, you're not going to be disappointed. Not that I was saying that anyone was disappointed in your game, Lloyd, but
no, and neither was I. Like
you're setting the expectation.
yeah, and like I don't want it to come across like ugh. That's not at all what it was. Like using the mechanical options that you have been given is what you should do. There's no like ugh on my part. That's like more of a realization on my part that I need to change things in the class I've made. You know.
Absolutely, and it's what we find when we play the game, man. Then Jeff then says martial class in Amethyst is amazing, and the Isclaf version is just as badass. One of the most fun classes I've played. That's cool, man. Mike the Piper is here, and he says, "Hey, Pruitgate." I'm just reading social comments now, but a few people have turned up. Fist with the dice, Matt says, and King Bobby B gets gored by a boar, man. The dude killed Rhaegar Targaryen, and he gets done in by a whine and a wild pig. I love shit like that.
Yes.
Yeah, man. That's it. Anything can happen, man.
It's really what I like about the wound system is that a peon can like stab you in the knee, and you can die from that. You know, like because that can happen. Like fucking Ed Stark gets stabbed in the back of the knee with a spear, right? Like. He shouldn't go down that way. He's a fucking hero, but like neither should the players, but they will, you know, and they should because combat's brutal and miserable and not fair. And like the baddies aren't going to be like, I'm going to wait until he's fought this person before I attack. He's going to stab you in the back. He's going to shank you in the liver, you know?
And then get killed for doing it. Mike the Piper says magic healing I can get if it's part of the setting. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Chad says, my favorite gents across the pond. One day we shall be in the same pub together, drink, play games, and be merry. We'll do it, man. We'll sort it out sometime. I don't know how, but sometime.
Yeah, someday.
Prudence says, yeah, me too, and I like playing games that are wounds, and any kind of trauma is a huge deal. That fighting through and getting weaker but still having to get shit done, or else. I love it. Excellent stuff. So, Lloyd, I think it is about time for us to reveal the initiative known as the Hobbit paradigm.
Oh shit!
Prepare contingency shields.
Press the button.
Press the button quick and do it, man. So, for those of you who are new to our streams, or unfamiliar with mine and Lloyd's particular tastes when it comes to the setting known as Middle Earth, some of you may have heard of it. There is a particular race of beings known as the Hobbits. The Hobbits live in the Shire, and they are quaint, plump folk that enjoy simple lives of eating and drinking and farming and gardening and, you know, just having a nice time. I would like you to imagine a battlefield, okay? Here, for miles around, the moaning of the wounded and the dead, okay? Yet still, a hobbit stands alive and unscathed, victory in its heart. This is the Hobbit paradigm. It is impossible and it cannot occur. Lloyd, explain more.
So, the situation is that to me, a hobbit is equivalent to a child, a human child, right? They're very small. They're obviously weak, right? They're not warriors. Like, if you take a hobbit warrior, right, which doesn't exist in the setting, let's get that clear first of all. There are no hobbit warriors. They're all farmers. So let's suggest that there is a hobbit warrior. This hobbit has like acquired chainmail and a shield and a sword, which would be a dagger, right? So let's say this hobbit is equipped that way. And then you take that hobbit and you put him against a human equipped in the similar way. There's no situation in which that hobbit defeats the person if they're of equal skill, because reach, okay? So this is like going to be really boring, but it's important to me. Right?
Can I just say that I think I've become an enabler because every time we talk about this, Lloyd talks about how easily he can beat up smaller people than he is. Please continue.
It's very important if you think about how you fight, okay? Let's suggest that I have a spear, okay? And I am like 6 foot and I have a spear, okay? I can thrust that spear, right, at such a distance that if the Hobbit has a sword, there's no situation in which he can hit me with his weapon, right? So that's clear.
Yeah. Right.
Then, the reach is so important to how you fight in reality, okay? It's very important. Because if I can't get near you with my weapon, you're just going to fucking kill me. If you have a sword and I have a dagger, I'm probably dead, right? It's just not going to happen. Unless somehow you manage to miss your strike and I dive right for you, still you should cut me at some stage. Like, yes. That's how combat works, right? Almost always.
Absolutely. And when it comes to sword fighting, like the way that it usually happens is that one, it's all about reach, but it's also about engaging into a grapple. And the way you do that is that you step into someone's threat range. And it is much easier to get into someone's threat range if you are much bigger than they are. You can just take one step where the Hobbit has to take 3. So you can then get closer to the being and lock them down before they can. Anyway, this isn't just, enabling Lloyd's battering hobbits.
But it's important that we get that out of the way and explain that is...
Yeah. Here comes the actual paradigm, because we already know this, ladies and gentlemen. We already know that we can batter hobbits. All of us can batter hobbits, and we're proud of it. Let's talk about the true meaning of the paradigm.
Okay, so recently Lionel from Two Guys T&D ran a game where a Middle-earth game. And the first game, there was a... so I'm looking at the comments and they're fucking cracking me up.
They're amazing. We'll read them in a bit.
Where the first game, where Nick Dawson was playing a knight, and that knight was killed by orcs, right? And in the second game, there was a situation where a hobbit on a pony, it hurts me, managed to escape an orc on a warg. Okay? A pack, right? So there's so many things here that, so warg,
carry on, sorry.
A warg is a huge wolf-like creature that demonstrably is like as fast, if not faster, than a horse over short distances, right?
Yeah.
A pony managed to outrun these things, right? Which shouldn't happen. But if that is happening, fine. On the back of each of these wargs is an orc. Now, if it's clear that a human can beat a hobbit in a fight, it's also likely that most orcs can beat most humans in a fight, is what I would say. They tend to be bigger, they tend to be rougher, just generally, right? Savage, well. Yes. And so then, if you extrapolate that to be a hobbit against an orc, you're running into trouble very quickly. So, I feel like we need a pie chart and like a graph and stuff. So basically the question is, how did this hobbit escape this situation when a human knight, did not? And the answer is it shouldn't happen. The answer to me is that all like characters should be treated the same within the setting, like appropriate to what they are. So if I'm going to be in my Against the Shadow game, I'm going to suggest that an orc has less chance, generally speaking, of defeating Nar in a fight than defeating Baragond, right? And I will treat that description on my half like when an orc comes up to Nar, or it wouldn't anymore since he's dead, but previously, if it had come up to Nar, I would describe it like as this like peonic, like pathetic thing that like Nar would not be afraid of. I know. But like Nar would not be afraid of any one orc, right? He wouldn't be afraid of a troll, because he's confident in his abilities and has proved himself over and over again that he can defeat those things. But Baragond is like a quick little sharp person. And so when I'm describing an orc coming to him, it would be a big, burly, hulking orc that is like approaching, and it's got death in his eyes, and you think that there's a good chance that it would fucking murder you, right? So when you're talking about then, if I had a hobbit in Against the Shadow, every orc would be a threat to its life. Like, there's no question in my mind. It doesn't matter mechanically that the characters are similar power levels, which they shouldn't be. I'll get onto that in a minute. But doesn't matter, because like in the setting, a hobbit is so much weaker and so like less capable than other races in the setting, that no matter what the orc is, it's going to be scary to the hobbit, and it should be a threat to its life.
The other thing that I will add before we get into the actual thing of a hobbit sharing like the same ability level as other people. The other thing I will say is that I actually think it's a little unfair if there is a challenge that fells one, you know what I mean, but then the punch is pulled when it's against a different type of class or player. You know, like the hobbit clearly has less HP and is not as good in a fight as the knight.
Yeah.
Because of that, it was pulled. The punch was potentially pulled, and I think hobbit or not, I think that's the thing that I think's a bit, you know. But I mean, I'm not criticizing. I mean, it's not my game. Like, it's not. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't us going after Lionel or anything. It's just an observation.
No, Lionel is fucking rad, and he knows that I adore him. Like, that's not. I'm not saying that like it's a terrible mistake. But I do think that if you're going to be willing to kill a character in session 1, then you have to be equally as willing to kill them in session 2, regardless of who the player or the character is. You know, like if you're not going to pull punches in a game, then you don't pull them at all, or you do pull them all the time. Like, it's got to be exactly, set a precedent. It's got to be the same rule throughout the game, you know? And like, just because a player has gotten themselves in an unfortunate situation, like, that's not your fault. That's the player's fault, you know? Like, and they should be punished for those mistakes. And even if it's like in that situation, like that hobbit, maybe you don't want them to die, but certainly they would be captured, you know? Like, maybe the orcs are like, this will make a delicious meal. We'll take it home with us, right? And then there's a chance for the players to rescue or whatever, which is what I did in one of the first Against the Shadow sessions. Like, Nar decided to sacrifice himself, and so it was unclear at the end of the game what we're going to do, but they captured him, and there was a chance for you to save him. Now, it wasn't a great chance. He had been stabbed with a Morgul blade, and so there was a real chance of him dying. But you made it, you know? But I think that you have to be consistent.
Like, though, so.
No. You have to be consistent, and like if you're going to be killing players, then you have to be equally likely to kill all the other players, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec. I'm just going to bomb through some comments, maybe whilst you smoke, Lloyd. So, so Thomas then says, what about Magic Viking? Oh, this is about Vikings. I'll get through this quickly. Magic Viking shrooms that make you berserk, thus ignoring some damages but gaining wounds. With chances of infection or amputation, for example. Good point. Jeff Doty says, this is everything that I'd hope it would be. Chad Nick says, you have my axe, bow, sword, sling, spear, pike, cudgel, and other weapon. Matt from A Fistful of Dice says, man, this is my jam right now. I'm taking a longsword class that is all about reach and mobility. That is everything in a fight. If I can move to reach you before you reach me, you're dead, like 99% of the time. Dude, this is exactly what I was saying, like, as well, like you rightly put it out as well. If you can move in quicker than the other person can, you can engage in a grapple and you can lock down any offensive capability that they have whatsoever. Which is like tenfold against a hobbit, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a warg as well, and we're not even talking about sword fighting. And this is the other thing, right? I don't know mechanics of a warg. I've never looked at the stats of the monsters. I don't want to know because I'm a player in that world. Don't want to know. But I'm assuming they're like the wolves of D&D, where they're all about tripping people,
yes,
and like getting them on the ground, and then they get advantage like when they're on the ground, so they can just savage you on the floor. That'd be so easy to do to a hobbit. Like, goodness
fucking hell,
anyway,
so easy.
Like, they'd be done. Anyway, Chad then says, Lloyd, you're starting pub brawls with real life little people. Lol.
All the time. All the time. Every day.
This video.
Fuck you. Watch it. Short noise.
Jeff says, Lloyd, I can beat children and hobbits in a fight. Colin's throwing down the wisdom. Matt says, the takeaway here is Lloyd could beat a kid in a fight almost every time.
But that's true. I could. Like, I'm not going to. I could beat a child in a fight.
You have a strong spanking hand, and you're goes on and on and on. Right, okay, I'm going to jump a few, I'm afraid, guys, just so we get to some more on-point questions. So Jeff says, to be fair to Lionel, but also unfair, the only reason the Hobbit made it out is because a Ranger squad Deus Ex. She did get it outrun and outfought before that. I was going to say, like, I thought the Hobbit killed the Warg. That's what, when I watched that, I could be wrong. Pretty sure the Hobbit killed the Warg, though. Jeff then says, also that session was so brutal emotionally speaking, one of my favorites. But I do think it would have made so much more sense for the Hobbit to have died. Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, like, I love that assassin, and our friend Taylor did a beautiful song in that because she's talented and wonderful. So that was great. That was amazing. And I'm not taking away from that session at all, man. It's just a thing that we have with Hobbits, I guess.
No, and again, like, I mean, like, I don't think, like, this is not us going, like, you're GMing wrong or you've done something wrong. It's just, like, a commentary on, like, the Hobbit paradigm and our hatred of Hobbits and, like, our, I guess, like, inane dedication to, like, realism in our fantasy settings. You know, it's, like, not that important, but it is to me, you know?
No, and I agree. And my only, like, I like the Hobbits in the films, but the whole reason it works in the films is because of that threat, and they are not at the same level as Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli. Like, that's the whole point, and that's what makes the drama. So,
and we had talked about recently that, like, even other warriors aren't on the same scale as, like, Aragorn. Like, there's a scene where Eowyn is fighting Gothmog, the big, and it's like this big, like, fucking terrifying battle for her, and Aragorn runs past and, like, casually, without stopping, cuts his head off, you know? Like, Aragorn is so superior to every other human almost that it's like, and then you compare that to a fucking Hobbit and there's no chance, you know?
Agreed. Chad Nick says, you, me, under the monkey bars, last bell. Carrying on the fighting children analogy. Prue then says, I could not agree more with this. It's actually part of why I generally don't like to play high-level D&D. If I'm a martial class fighter the size of a dragon's nostril, nope. I'm afraid to disagree with you there, but I've already gone on many a rant about why epic level play is a good thing, but never mind, not the topic. Thomas says, yeah, but it's really fun to race. Fun race to roleplay, though. Is it? As Mike the Piper quite rightly put, the Hobbits are from Somerset and Gloucester. I live in Cheltenham, or used to live in Cheltenham, where I grew up. Cheltenham is next to Gloucester, which is what, you know, Gloucestershire was what the Shire was based on. And I've been around those people my entire life. It's not. It isn't the best. So just, you know, just take my word for that, okay, guys. There's oh, sorry, I'm skipping comments now. Jeff says, I totally agree in general, though. It makes no sense that a hobbit could be anywhere as capable as a warrior as any human. One of the many reasons the small people races in general are something I hate.
Yep.
Matt says, listen, I often think about how well I'd do if I enrolled in elementary school right now. I would be better at everything than everyone. I would absolutely kill it. And Matt, I'm confident that you would. In fact, I'd be disappointed if you didn't. So, like... Matt Clicker's the new Billy Madison, according to Chad. Then Jeff says, I don't think it'd be worth it, Matt. There's always the tiniest chance that someone is better than at least one thing than you. And then that's the embarrassment that can never be left behind. And I'm pretty sure I'd still be stuck in school if I started again. Okay. So, like, my only suggestion is to play it like the movies. Like, if you want to be a hobbit, absolutely, but take on board the fact that there is, like, a significant extra risk to you, because that's the tension of being a hobbit. Yes. Like, you're there as you're not in the same league as everyone else, and that's where the fun of Lord of the Rings is, you know?
Like, different races are good at different things in Lord of the Rings, right? So, like, dwarves are excellent warriors, humans are excellent warriors, elves are incredible rangers. Hobbits are good thieves, right? They're good sneaking. Like, you don't notice them around, which is, like, the most pathetic trait that a race can have. It's like you don't even know they're there, right? That's how important they are. But if you're going to play a hobbit, then play a treasure hunter, play a scholar, something like that. And don't expect to win fights. Like, don't get into fights. And if I'm playing a Hobbit in a game where there are other characters who are not Hobbits, I'm hiding when a fight starts. That's like my job in a fight, is to not get killed, you know?
Remember the culmination of Return of the King, which I believe is one of the most epic, amazing culminations of any film ever, when the challenge for Frodo and Sam is to fight Gollum, a creature that is their size and aggressive and obviously filled by this hatred and this possession of the ring, right? Like, that is so dramatic. It doesn't have to be them, like, fighting wargs that are 3 times the size of them. It can be something that on their level. They can even fight a few orcs, like, but that's like a monumental challenge that is so desperate and terrifying. But like, you know, like, and even then, like, Sam had Sting, which had like obviously a helping hand. So yeah, I would treat it like that. Like, if you're gonna use the Hobbit, remember, it is a gift.
Oh yeah, so that's the Hobbit paradigm. Just fucking, you know. They're small, they're weak, you should play them that way, and the GM should treat them that way, is my takeaway, I guess. And it's basically a thing of like, if you're gonna, I mean, this is the big takeaway for me, is if you're gonna pull punches, pull them all, or don't pull any.
I agree. So the next thing on our topics is about my Lorekeepers session the other night, and about how I broke some rules. Or rather established, I don't even know how you'd call it, what you'd call it, to be honest, Lloyd.
Yeah, I guess it would be, if like you were working in a business, it would be best practice, you know, like the way they fucking say that in tech companies. Yeah, I guess it would be a tradition or like a maxim, I guess is what it is you as the GM should do as little as possible, and let the players do the thing, right? That's like the traditional view.
Agreed. Let me explain, spoiler-free for those of you who haven't seen it yet, but in the Lorekeepers, it was Chapter 10, Equinox, and in it, I wish to feature the, you know, Lorekeepers is all about legends, it's all about stories, so the legend and story that the players were learning about in this particular episode was the backstory of my main villain. Something that I'd thought up a long time ago and had been holding back and really excited to tell them about. Now, it's not exactly like a complicated backstory, but nor is it something that you can throw away in a few lines. There are a few elements as to, you know, how it came about. So I introduced the fact that in the Lorekeepers, there's this world, this other world that exists in parallel to the real world or the material plane, known as the Telling, where legends and stories echo within it, and you can go inside the Telling if you have the right capability, and you can interact and you can use, you know, power from that realm. That's been sort of like a running theme. So they finally go into this place. They finally go into the Telling. It's the origin of Equinox. And before they go in, one of my NPC characters, Weaver, says to them, remember, and this is just me as the DM saying, hey guys, you can interact. Okay, you can talk to people in here. You can do whatever you like treat it like it's the real world or whatever, and then you end up in there. And then the origin story happens, and they are presented with a number of scenes that I had sort of thought up in my head, had a few little notes on what happens in them, and I sort of improvised and sort of read my way through these different scenes, giving players opportunities every now and then to speak when they wanted to. However, I noticed as I was going through it that when I was prompting the players, when I was saying, so Marius, what do you think of this? And Lloyd, I would like to know your opinion on this, because as you quite rightly said, I spent quite a long time doing this.
So, like, if you had told me before the game that you were going to spend an hour talking, I would have said, Rob, you're fucking mental and you're a bad GM, right? That would have been my gut reaction. But like, it was really well presented, and like I said this in the game as well, like, you're an actor by trade, and so I think that helps a lot, right? I think that, like, and I had said this too, like, if it was you had a document open and you were like, you walk into a room and there are 5 people standing there,
which I'd love to try, because that sounds hilarious. Like, how long would people laugh?
one of them is a man and he's got a red cloak. One of them is a witch and she has fire in her hand. Like if you and then you were like, and then one of them says this, and then the other one says this, and blah blah blah. It would have been hell, right? And I would have called you on it in the game. I would have. That's why in that situation, Marius would have been like, okay, I'm getting in there and doing shit, right? But the way you presented it was very theatrical, which is great, and very like cinematic. And so to me, I was just like watching a performance, which is great. And I was watching a story unfold. And then when you like were asking me to get involved, I was like, no, because if I get involved, it won't be what I'm watching. It'll be something else. And I'm really enjoying this thing that's happening. And I felt like there was like more to it. And I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't get involved, because it felt to me like the story was a real thing that had happened, which is true. And I didn't want to like fuck with it. I didn't want to go in there and be like, yeah, but what about this thing? And then they're like, oh, what? And then the whole thing would change. Like when you're like watching something in a pool of water and then I like poke my finger in it and there's a ripple and everything changes. So I didn't really feel the need to, because I wasn't bored. I was entertained the whole way through. It was also, to me, like for Marius, he was watching this thing like a legend made real. And I think that his reaction would have been mine, which is like, holy shit, and like that's enough for him to just be like, wow, this is mental. Like, oh my God, holy shit. And like, I and Marius didn't feel the need to get involved,
Which was interesting because I was like, because I agree. Like any of the, like most times, like if someone said that to me, like I'd be like, don't do that. And I found myself doing it. And I remember when I was coming up with this session, usually I'm like, I come up with a few things that I kind of want to happen or whatever, or problems for you to solve or whatever. And then that's it. But this one, I was like, man, there's quite a lot that I actually need to explain for you to actually understand this dude, this villain, like, or what happened or whatever. And it's about storytelling. So I should probably tell you the story. And Lorekeepers got involved. And for those of you watching, I'm going to try and avoid spoilers at all costs. Don't worry. But like, Lorekeepers started talking to them, and you did at some points as well. And I did what I liked about it is when they started speaking to them, it was affecting them slightly. Like they did sort of alter their perception slightly on what was being told to them in the story, which I really liked. But now I understand in hindsight that you were actually watching because you just wanted to know what was going to happen, and me putting that on you, wasn't, it wasn't a bad thing, I don't think, but it wasn't a highly effective thing because you were happy what you were doing. And it confuses me, Lloyd. I don't know. It confuses me.
It's a tricky one because, like I said, like I think, like generally speaking, you shouldn't do that, right? I think, like particularly if you're new to the game, you want to try. I would say avoid exposition as much as possible. You like, and I said there was a thread earlier that somebody put up about like Tim put it up about like what's the thing you would have told yourself when you first started GMing, and mine would have been be reactive, not proactive, right? Yes. And I think that's a really good rule, just generally speaking. Like you want to let the players do things and have the world react to them. But you're not new to the game. You're very good at the game, and again, like you're a performer, and so like that was like it didn't feel like you were just going, here's a bunch of shit I have to tell you. It was like, here's the fucking story you've been waiting for 10 episodes, and so I was just like, fucking rad, definitely, finally, I was like really hyped to like see it happen, and I didn't feel a need to get involved.
It's weird. It is weird. It's and the only thing I can attribute to is like when people in some role-playing games or whatever say they're playing a bard, some talented people will whack out a guitar and play a song and people will listen. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the only thing that I can, but at the same time, like that is kind of, I don't know. Don't get me wrong. I don't regret doing it one bit. I look on it as a weird anomaly that just seemed to happen, and it just seemed to work. And I would never do it probably again in this campaign, like to that extent. I don't think.
I think it was good because I think there's like some. It's a very narrative campaign, the Lorekeepers. There's a lot of story. You know, there's like a real thread that runs through it, and it's good to know like what the story is, because it's been vague, you know, deliberately and effectively vague. Like we haven't been sure, and there was a big kind of realization during that game that we struggled with, and then seeing at the end kind of like some clarity to that was really satisfying. I think, you know, but yeah, I don't know. Like I have confusion is my main feeling about it. Like, you know, like I know that I should have been like, but I wasn't, you know. But I have a tendency when I'm playing, particularly only when I'm playing, to dominate the conversations that are going on, because I don't like silence. Like when the mics, when you, for example, will say somebody says something and the mics are all silent and I don't see anyone else unmuting, I'm like, oh God, I'll do it, and then I'll start speaking, right? Mm-hmm. That's like a problem that I have, and particularly when we get into like tactical discussions or things like that, I have a tendency to be like, here's the plan, because that's my favorite part of the game, you know.
That's also the character as well, which is helpful.
Sure, but I do it in lots of other games, like the Game of Thrones game I'm in. I'm like a tactical person in that, and I have a tendency to just be like, here's the plan, I'll speak for 20 minutes, I'll tell you what the plan is, and then you guys go do it. And like, that's not okay, and I'm trying to stop doing that. But it's not the same. It's kind of hard to explain. It's not the same thing, you know.
It isn't, because you're participating in the role that you have been given as a player in a role-playing game. You're reacting to the information I'm giving you. You know, it doesn't matter like how often you're doing it or whatever. You are operating in the confines of your position in the role-playing game. That isn't like and I don't know. I think it worked because, like you said, I was vague. I had at least tried to ensure that you were all interested in what I was going to say.
And I think you made sure that like it was clear that we could get involved if we wanted to. Like it wasn't like because it was interactive. Like it wasn't like we like went somewhere and this guy was just like, hello, here is some exposition, I'm going to speak now. You know, we were there and in it, and if we wanted to get involved we could have, but we didn't want to. And I imagine that felt really awkward for you, because you were like, guys, like you're playing the game, can you do something? Because like sometimes like you'll put something to players and they'll just be like, you know, and just like blinking and looking stupidly. You're like, guys, I need you to do something here, you know? But I think from all of us, like none of us were like, all right, Rob, get to the fucking end. I would have watched another 20 minutes of it, you know? Like I was into it. So
I appreciate that, man. Like I think Barker brought up something quite that I think also like helped. Like why it helped was because you'd been given time at the beginning of the session, and and this is something Matt pointed out to me, which I hadn't thought about before, but my villain's plan had been so effective that it actually threatened to break the game, in the sense that you didn't want to be Lorekeepers anymore. He had actually divided you. He had actually like dropped a bomb that you guys were like, well, that's it then, isn't it? We're fucked. And I was like, I hadn't thought of it that way before, but I was like, wow, yeah, he really did. Like he really fucked you guys over.
Yep.
So you had all that wicked drama at the beginning. Like it was a really, really drama-driven session anyway. And what I liked in particular was that you guys had been put into a position of uncertainty. And we'll talk about Marius because obviously you're the one that can, you know, talk to me about this. But like with Marius, what I really liked was it was about judgment and about you know, who decides who should live and die, you know, who gets to make that call.
Who watches the Watchmen?
And exactly. And it was that same question was being mirrored by Marius's whole journey throughout the campaign, which was super cool for me because I hadn't even thought of it. And then like when you started role playing with the material, like it became clear. I was like, oh my God, like this is exactly the same thing. And you made that realization in character. So there was all of this sort of uncertainty and build up to it where you didn't know what was going to happen with the game. You didn't know how you were going to go on. And then the answer was dropped in front of you. And I think that might be another reason why you were tolerant of me talking for ages and ages and ages.
Yeah, well, there was like a real chance that the game was going to break apart. Like Marius was just like, I should leave these people. They're more worthy than I am to like have this quest. Like I'm as guilty as the baddie, you know? And so And it was because fucking Barker like dropped this bomb on him, which was amazing. Like, when's yeah, I guess I'll say when's your trial, which I thought was really interesting, like a really good thing that Marius would never have thought about, you know, because he's so consumed with like saving the world and doing the right thing, he never thinks about himself.
Well, that's it. Like but that was the great thing, because that had been taken away from him. He then reverted back to the way he was before, and I was just like, that's just. And I don't know whether that was intentional or not, man. But like, it was just, yeah, man. So I think because the stakes have been put there, not just by me, but by you guys as well. Like, I didn't tell you, oh, you're now going to break apart because you've learned this. Like, you guys did that on your own. Yeah. So, yeah, like, I think that the circumstances were right for it to happen. If I'd started the game with me doing that, it wouldn't have gone the same at all.
And it's about pacing, which is something that you're good at as well. So it was like the first 2 hours of the game was us having our own stuff, and you were barely involved, in fairness, right? Like there was Ezerad, is that his name?
Oh God.
And there was a chat with him and stuff, but then there was really like 2 hours of us, like there was 2 discussions and fights. One of them was directly after that, and then one was later when we were camping and stuff. Very heavy, all us, and you were just like munching popcorn, which is the best position to be in as a GM. But we had all of that. So then when the thing came where you were doing a lot, we were all like, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. We've done like 2 hours of just us talking, and we should do something story related in this game. And then there was lots of it. And then at the end, it finished with us again, which I think was important as well, So I think it was fine. Like, I wouldn't be confident enough to like do it myself.
But you said that you thought, like, this is what my next question was going to be to you, Lloyd, because in that section you said, I might give that a go. And I was wondering if you still feel that way.
I thought about it, and I'm kind of thinking, like, I don't think that I would have the ability to, like, pull it off and make it interesting for the whole way through,
I disagree.
Well, maybe I could, but, yeah, I would have to do a lot of prep, and I hate doing prep. I'd have to think about it a lot, and I try to avoid that whenever possible because I'm lazy. So I think it could work in a campaign. I obviously wouldn't do it in one shot, but I think in a campaign. But then again, the campaigns that I'm running, it could happen in Against the Shadow. I think that's one place where it could happen. And I have thought about like what it might be and what it might be about, and then I have some ideas, and maybe it will happen there. It wouldn't happen in some of the other campaigns that I run. I don't think. Like, I just started running the Star Wars game, and it wouldn't happen there. It wouldn't make sense there. But in Against the Shadow, because it's quite dramatic and quite like there's a big plot and stuff, I think it could happen there potentially.
Yeah, I think it depends on the setting again. Like with Lorekeepers, it has sort of like it's like the Force visions. Like you were seeing stuff from the past and the present as well, and the future in the game as well. So I suppose if you did it in Star Wars, it'd have to be a Jedi thing, I guess. But it could work in Middle Earth, I reckon, easily. They see
a vision of the past or the Second Age, or seeing someone forge a ring or something like that would all make sense.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah,
something like that could be interesting.
So I'm just going to bomb through these questions because we have 2 things to get to. And I know you've got a game later and you probably want to have a rest between this and then. So,
character.
So Prue left because she hadn't seen Lorekeepers. Well, I don't think we didn't spoil anything, did we? So
no.
But okay, well, never mind. But then Jeff says, I think the old saying, you have to know the rules before you can break them, applies here. People should follow the rules of the game and understand why they are rules. Then you can break them. Yeah, and then he says, with good execution and nuanced reflection after that. The thing is, like, in terms of role-playing, I mean, there isn't really rules as such. I mean, I call them rules just to make it a simple term for people to know what me and Lloyd were going to be talking about today. There aren't really hard and fast rules, but there are accepted guidelines, shall we say, that the DM shouldn't spend ages just going on and on. But I agree that if you are aware of those and you know when to deviate from the status quo, like, I think you'll be okay. Yeah. Like, there's going to be a session 11, so that's all right. Like, I didn't screw it, although Equinox nearly did, not me.
Yeah.
Then he says, there are a lot of people who I would never trust to narrate that much, but Rob would absolutely be on my shortlist to do it. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that, man. That's very nice of you to say. And then he finally says, I agree that the setting, the big exposition that far into the campaign when there's attachment investment is good too. Throwing up a huge thing, episode 1 would be tougher to work out as well. Yeah, they've been waiting for it. And I'd held back for a while because you release information in bursts to keep it interesting, and it changes people's opinions on the situation and stuff. That was my plan anyway, and it seemed to pay off, which I was really proud of. But it only paid off because my players ran with it. Like if I had said that and they went, okay, whatever, then you know what I mean. So it does definitely take 2 to tango, or at least in our case 5 to tango, which would be a weird tango.
Very weird.
And then he says, I use rules as an easy term for communication. Rules isn't the right word, but the meaning gets across. Yeah, absolutely. So, Lloyd, enough about that. We're going to talk about war. War. What is it good for? Yeah, I would have war. Stop it. Stop it, Thorin. Another Hobbit paradigm.
Yeah. War. That's a trope from Lord of the Rings, is people saying war and Mordor.
It's not a trope in Lord of the Rings. It's made a trope in The Hobbit because they keep falling back.
Yes.
Like that's why The Hobbit seems like a parody of Lord of the Rings, because they keep rolling those words out, and it's like, just stop it. Anyway.
We're going to talk about war and why. So it's a very common thing that settings you're playing in are at war. And that's for lots of reasons. Obviously, it means that it's easy to explain why there are so many soldiers and warriors around. It's a good way for the players to be involved in a side, so pick a side and stick with it. And it's kind of a good way, it's good for opportunists as well. People who want to make a quick buck, like the Star Wars game I'm running is set during a war because that's when merchants make a shit ton of money, So there's lots of reasons why, and it tends to be the case, I would say, not overwhelmingly, but the majority of settings that I've seen, there's a war going on.
And also, I'll put this in really quickly because this is what I have to say about it. Like Matt Colville made quite a good video a little while back. I like some of his stuff. And he made a really good point, which is in medieval and feudal settings, if there are 2 countries and they're not at war, then something's probably wrong. There has to be a reason why they're not at war rather than they are at war. There should be a reason. So kind of.
Yeah, no, that's really, really true. In a feudal system, if you have the might, then you are at war. You should be. You're always there's not the same stigma that we have. And so Isloft is constantly at war. There's always Jarls fighting each other. It's not like a war, but it's always, there's always fights and border skirmishes and stuff like that. But the thing that I notice is that you never see the war affect people, really. And I had posted up maybe last week, maybe it was even longer than that. I was listening to the song Skibbereen by the Dubliners, which is about this man who during the English occupation had to leave his home and his beautiful home and wander with his son. And his son is how come you talk about home all the time, but we left? And it's a question of that. And that's really interesting to me because that's what happens. You have to leave if there's a war. You can't stay around. You know? Yeah. Well, you are personally responsible, Rob.
I'm personally responsible, obviously.
And so there's lots of things that happen in a war that we don't think about. So one of them, obviously, is refugees. People leave. And that's happening literally in our world all the time. It's a huge issue, and everyone's I'll just hang around. Peasants will just wait and have their lands burnt and become oppressed. It's not what happens. But more than that, after a war or during a war, what if you are occupied? What about the horrible things that happen then? Like this Skibbereen thing, the taxes were outrageous and he couldn't afford to pay them, so he had to leave his home. And so that's one thing. Then also the occupying forces, are they constantly being arseholes? Why aren't they being arseholes? They've just fought a war against these people. Their friends have died fighting them. Obviously they're going to be shitty towards them. But also the damage to the world. So you like Red Letter Media as well, and there's a great bit in the Star Wars review that Mr. Plinkett does where he's why why in this war that lasts for so long is Coruscant just fine, and
Coruscant's
everywhere is
fine.
just fine. Nowhere is seeing the war except for these backwater, middle of nowhere planets. Even if Coruscant isn't attacked directly, the influence of the war should mean that there are fucking lines for food. You know, there should be disrepair, things like that.
It is attacked directly as well.
Yeah, you know, there's no reason why it should be fine. It should be clear that there's a war going on. Like, think about what happened in our world, rationing globally, you know, and like everyone has to go to work all the time, and you're drafted, and people have to go and fight even if they don't want to. All this shit happens, and I never see it, you know.
It was one of the big things that made me realize, like, I mean, I know we just talked about Lorekeepers for ages, but my best example, so forgive me. But so we did session 6 of Lorekeepers, which for those of you that don't know, was taking place in the Underdark, and it culminated in a massive gargantuan battle against an unspeakable monster, and the Lorekeepers were triumphant, and they had a new legend forged about them, and it was all groovy. But the whole point of the Lorekeepers is that they're inspiring people. They're inspiring people to believe in them, so to keep the flame of the legend alive. And it became very apparent to me that while they are busy having these amazing battles and things like that, we still haven't really seen an awful lot of the people they're fighting for, and that's where my whole idea came up with the point that we should probably start looking at what's actually happening to Farwide. So that's where all the sort of battles have started happening, and we've been seeing refugees and stuff, because I realized I hadn't been doing that, which, you know, is cool. It's really cool. Like, it's the coolest thing. You see why they have to fight for what they're fighting for, and you see the cost of what happens if they don't. So it just makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. And it's like one of the things that there's the session where we were going, and we found all those people walking, this like caravan of people who had like left Freedom of Salvation because there was like a war going on, and that's what you do. You don't hang around in a city that's being attacked, you know. And so that made a lot of sense, and it made the whole war feel more real and more like effective, you know, because like people are fucking struggling and suffering in this war, like as they would do, you know.
Definitely. So what other ways then? Like we've said about obviously showing the effect on peasants and refugees and things like that. What are other ways to really, really hammer home the tone of a costly and devastating war?
So hunger is the big one for me. You need a lot of food to feed a lot of soldiers. And so if you're at war, where's like that food has to come from somewhere, and usually it's from heavily taxing peasants. Is the traditional way to do it. Now in the Middle Ages, they wouldn't be standing armies most of the time. It would be like, oh, we're going to war now, and you fight for a season, then you go home to your farm and make sure that you have food for next year. Professional soldiers cost a village a lot, and so if you have a village, you could probably, most villages can support like 2 professional soldiers, in terms of like you have to feed them, you have to clothe them and arm them and things like that. And so you have to think about like the huge cost that goes into like having someone whose job it is just to fight. Almost no one's job was just to fight. One of the things you could see a lot of would be nobles dying, which doesn't happen outside of war unless they die of old age. Nobles don't really die of like sickness or of hunger or of the things that peasants suffer. And so you might like hear of characters that you had met who have died, or you might hear of dukes dying, and you know, very important people dying, because the nobility's job in a war is to lead the people. And like, so they're professional warriors most of the time, nobles, because they can afford to do it, and it's their responsibility ostensibly to protect their people.
That's really interesting.
You know?
Oh, sorry.
No,
I was just saying, it's just that you were saying about nobles dying and stuff. That made me think of the Battle of Agincourt, where English and French and all kinds of different knights all sort of agreed with each other. Like it was just sort of like I guess it was like an unspoken thing. Like they had like, no, it wasn't. It was like a tome of chivalry or something. But there were agreed rules that what would happen in war. And if you managed to capture an enemy knight, the chivalrous and done thing to do was to sell them back to the enemy for a cost. However, Agincourt comes around and that goes straight out the window. And all of a sudden, houses of great families that have existed since time immemorial are just collapsing, like,
Yeah.
and it's destroying the economy. People are no longer able to sell crops to people because there's no one buying them anymore, because all of them, all of them are dying. Like, it throws the entire country into economical disaster, and I thought that's really interesting.
Yeah, this idea of like ransoming important people back is a big thing as well, in the Middle Ages, And so if your setting is, and it probably is, vaguely medieval, like that's something that would happen. Nobles don't die, they just don't. Like those rules are in place so that the rich people don't die in a war. That you can get captured and you're in prison for a little bit, and then you get sold back to your people who can afford to pay for you. And like you look at like Jaime Lannister, for example, he's like captured and then sold back or whatever. So it's a big thing. But other ways that you would see like the war affect the world is like just through like problems with crops and stuff like that. Like people trying to like imagine your job is to be a farmer and then like your land is invaded and somebody burns your fields. That's like you're dead. Like your family is dead. Your village is dead. Like if you burn those fields, nothing is going to grow there for at least a year. And if you're a subsistence farmer, you're dead. So villages would just be empty, which would be another thing that you would notice. I guess you'd also see lots of wounded people. Like during and after a war, there would be lots of like men coming home from the war, and women, I guess, in a fantasy setting, who would be like badly injured, like lost limbs, and so you would see this huge influx of homeless people or like beggars and things like that because those people can't work.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts of this is like, if you're running a game where there's a war going on, then you should be ensuring that all of the quests that you're putting in front of your players are related to the war. So, like you say, if men are coming home from the war, even if the war's over, like people that would have been militia or soldiers are no longer present in the town. There is a rise in crime. All of a sudden, there aren't people to protect small outback towns from goblin invaders or whatever, like there are reasons why that's happening, because there's no longer that protection anymore. People's crops are being burned down. People need to stop the people doing that. Like if you link it all in with your adventures that you're giving to your players, like it then writes itself. Like you just say, what does the war cost this area? There's a billion adventures for you to undergo there.
I think the rising crime is a really interesting thing that I hadn't thought of before. Like, if all of the just and honest men who believe in law go and sign up with the army because that's what they would do, who's left?
Right.
Like, who's left? All the shitty people who are not willing to die for their country, thieves guilds and gangs and stuff, right? So then all the just
Deserters.
men and deserters and criminals and like mercenaries and stuff who like don't want to go and die in this war, they're left. And so when there's a quarter of the guards left in the city, when there used to be so many more, who's policing all that stuff? All that stuff that goes on all of a sudden.
And then people are making money from the fact that like rations are becoming scarce, so you can now sell a loaf of bread for like 5 gold rather than like a copper piece, like because inflation changes, because there isn't enough like supply anymore.
Another thing that really happens is opportunistic lords, right? So something that we did in Game of Thrones, which I really loved, is that we're playing during the War with the Five Kings, and we sided with Stannis, and we were going with our forces, which was like 50 men, maybe 60, to the coast to go and sail away. And we came to the town, which was the coastal town, and it was besieged by another army, and we didn't know who had sided with who. And so we sent some people in to like find out. We discovered that the besieging army had sided with Joffrey, and their lands were close to ours. And so what we did is we sent a message into the people in the castle, and we were like, we're going to help you kill these people. And so I was an opportunistic lord. We killed those people, we won that battle, and then I immediately sent a message home, and I was like, that castle's undefended, go the fuck and capture it. Which can't happen in a peaceful time. You can't just have things like that happen. But in a war, crafty nobles are going to get so much richer and so much more powerful because all of the laws are kind of much more vague,
Absolutely. I completely agree. That's a good point. You hear a lot about the soldiers and politics and fights, but rarely do you see the ruined cities and lost lives. Then Taylor and Jeff are talking more about the Hobbit paradigm and its truth. And then Jeff then says, I think it goes beyond just war. Many settings and games tend to ignore consequences of the world, which is a shame. Those consequences are the most interesting things in the game.
Yep. So one of the things that I put at the start of the Isklov document as like a pillar of the setting, I have like violence, brutality, consequences. Like it's so important to the setting that if you raid a village and somebody remembers that, somebody sees you and remembers that, then that Jarl who lives there, he's going to remember that shit. He's going to send people after you, or he's going to make sure that your life is hell. Or if you like go somewhere and you like win a drinking contest against somebody who's famous, or like win a fight against somebody who's famous. Let's say you beat someone in a fight. You're gonna have people following you everywhere you go to beat your ass so that they can say that they've beaten you. Things like that, like those are minor consequences, but even big ones, like in a war, all that shit's so important,
I agree. And also by showing consequences happen, say you are in Isklov then, by showing those consequences actually having an effect in the world, you are thereby encouraging your players to make smart decisions to then act on those consequences. If they're a fledgling clan and they realize, oh, what would be really good is if these two clans go to war, thus weakening this one so we can, take advantage of that. Actually looking at the world and basing their decisions on things that they know they can make happen because those actions have consequences.
Absolutely.
It's a really cool thing to consider, especially for like kingdom building and which we both love. Like that's something that we've always liked. So I think most people like that, to be honest.
Yeah. I don't see it a lot. Mike is doing a great kingdom building campaign for us at the moment, but I don't see too much of that in games where like people put down roots and build a town or build a place, and it's a very satisfying part of the game.
There's something on the horizon for me that I won't go into, but there's something that I've been tinkering with that I think I'd like to get going with at some point. Probably after we've done Vampire, because I know I promised you a Vampire game.
Where the fuck is that?
Where's the Vampire game? We will do Vampire soon. So is that it about war then, Lloyd? So in that case, then, we are going to finish this stream. But before we do so, I did say in the stream earlier, getting people to come over to this, that we do have a little bit of an announcement that Lloyd would like to make, which You
phrase it as a huge announcement.
I made it as a huge announcement. It is a huge announcement. It's huge for me. Like, I love this. So, Jay Smith, yes, I did say Vampire. Yes, I will at some point be running a Vampire game from the World of Darkness setting at some point. That Lloyd's going to be in. And I think Mike Lasham also said he wanted to be in that as well. So you two definitely have a spot. But anyway, sorry. Trampling on the huge announcement, Lloyd. What is this huge announcement?
So recently in Against the Shadow, the most recent episode, we had 2 characters die.
May they rest in peace.
May they rest. May they go to a far green country. Yeah. And one of our players left the game thereafter. Which is unfortunate. But yeah, that's a thing that happens. It had been 16 sessions, but we're going to get a new player in to the game, and that player is the infamous...
the dreadful.
Yeah, I'm very bad at like building hype because I'm like not very excited about other humans.
I'm not excited about this at all. I don't even like the guy.
It's going to be a better game master. Michael Barker is going to join Against the Shadow, which is going to be very interesting, I think.
It's going to be very interesting because Barker is himself a huge Lord of the Rings fan. From everything that I've seen, I mean, he's a great role player anyway. Like, I mean, I'm really happy that he's in Lorekeepers. Well, I'm happy that all of you are in Lorekeepers, but like he has a yeah, he's really good. He's really good, and he gets Middle Earth, I think.
Yes.
And I think he's definitely going to buy into what the rest of us are already doing, which is. With Against the Shadow, I always find I'm having to up my game as a role player because everyone else is so good. Like there was a point where we've talked about it before, but someone dropped some like elven like language. Like it was the first time anyone had ever done it, and I was like, oh yes, of course, we need to be able to speak Elven if we're going to pull off this setting correctly. So I started like looking up some Elven phrases and stuff, and like like how like focusing on how they talk more and stuff. And
So there's the thing that happens in Against the Shadow, which kind of just, I don't know how it happened. I think I started it early on, but you guys did it from day one as well, where like there's never a conversation between characters which is like, hey, how are you, man? Never, right?
Yeah.
It's always in Tolkien-esque sort of poetic language. And like that in itself, I think elevates the game above other games that I've run, because it's always thematic. Like everything is thematic.
Agrees.
And so I think that's contagious, I think that, and Barker's well capable of doing that as well.
For example, how are you, man, would be, I fear the last battle weighed heavily upon you, Beregond. Do you think you will be able to keep your spirits up before we reach the city in time? It's there is like you have. It's a more sort of poetic way of speaking, I suppose. It's really peculiar. Amazing though. It makes it easy to roleplay it weirdly. But also not. Like you have to know. I don't know. Like it's tricky. It is easy and then not easy at the same time. Like I remember Dan, who plays Cynaric, amazingly, the rider of Rohan. And I remember I can't remember why, but he was buying, that was it. We were waiting for Caius, who plays Beregond, to jump into the stream because Caius was late. So he was trying to buy us time, buy him time to arrive. So he kept like coming up with this like different things to say to us, like in all this flowery language. And he's like, poor Janet had like been like going all day or whatever, like, and then he's like, oh, that was great.
Yeah, it's just a way of speaking, and I think you're right. It makes roleplay easier because you have to choose your words more carefully. But no matter what you say, it's thematic and it fits. Like when you choose those words more carefully, then a conversation of like, "Are you okay after that battle?" becomes, "Your thoughts have been clouded of late." How and like it just like drips the setting, which is just really powerful. I think
it is super powerful. And man, I'm just so excited because it. I mean, Against the Shadow is an amazing game anyway. And the fact that we're getting someone new in, like, really interests me because I was a little shit, and I went to Barker and I was like, "Do you know what you're going to play yet, Barker?" And he was like, "I'm not telling you." And I'm like, "No." Like, so, and I like that because our characters. The difference, our characters are going to be really resistant to him because we've just lost some people, and we don't. The last thing, for many different reasons I won't go into, the last thing they want is to bring more people with them to like have them in danger or whatever. But as a player, I'm so excited because it's going to be like a new dynamic in the existing group, and I think it's going to be swell. Don't tell me how, but like, have you got some ideas as to how you're going to bring him in yet?
Yes. I do. For both him and Dennis's new character, I do have ideas on how they're going to come in, and a reason for you to bring them as well is important because, like you say, there's lots of reasons why you wouldn't and why you shouldn't, in your character's eyes, certainly. So there is some stuff that I'm working on to accelerate that.
Fight you at every turn.
Yeah, good. You should.
I'm like, no, Lloyd, no.
You should do that.
Just kidding. And I wouldn't dream of asking you what's going to happen in the next session because I love Against the Shadow so much. And you can definitely go and check out the previous 16 sessions of Against the Shadow on Lloyd's channel. Lloyd, I think we've done very well. We have dealt with a lot of interesting topics. The Hobbit paradigm is out there for the world to see. And let us hope it is embraced before it is too late. Anything else before we go?
No, I think that's it.
Perfect. Well, thank you ever so much for you guys who have joined us in the chat. And for those of you after the fact, if you like this video, give it a like. If you'd just like to see more like it, give me a subscribe or not. We're all friends here, or are we? Wink. And also, we're probably going to do them even if you don't like them. I've decided that's like the new bit of my tag. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to say, I'm just going to do this anyway. I can't help it. And thank you very much for watching. And I hope that all of your performances are up to standard. 2 winks.